Hello, hello everyone. Thank you for joining this event on territories of commons in Europe. Hopefully the event is also streamed on the YouTube channel of Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna. Let me first say that I'm very glad of having all these authors today presenting their contributions. I will briefly introduce this event together with José Luis Viveropol, who is present as well, as you can see. I start by saying that I'm a PhD fellow at Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna. I'm currently researching on the food commons and the common agricultural policy. And regarding territories of commons in Europe, well, a few months ago, we started this project with José Luis, with the aim of mapping all the territories of commons, all the common lands, all the common territories in Europe. And to do this, we aim to involve a huge network of contributors. Now, if you allow me, I will share my screen and use some PowerPoint presentation. So it would be better for you to see. Just a second. Can you see?
Yes, Antonio.
I take it as a yes. Okay, great. Perfect. So why this initiative? As I hinted a few seconds ago, the goal of me and José Luis was to build a network of researchers and activists all over Europe to try to come up with a global figure of something that is currently ignored by our common agricultural policy and our European legislation, which is the relevance of these territories of commons, of common territories of lands and coastlands, waterways, forests, pastures that are collectively owned or managed or enacted as commons. So we would like with this initiative to pursue a two-folded objective. Let's say the first one is a scientific goal, which is, as I said, to try to come up with a global figure, with a pan-European figure of how much land in Europe, so also including countries that are not in the European Union, but still in the European, let's say, continent, so such as, for example, also Iceland, Albania, Norway, and so on. So this first scientific goal consists in finding out how much territory in each country is owned or governed or managed as a commons. Because so far the data on this particular issue, as I hinted at the beginning, are very scattered. They are not consistent all over Europe, and on top of that, the only data that are commonly available, let's say, are on those on Eurostat, the website of the European Union, but they are not updated and they are not complete, let's say. And the second goal of our research of this network is a political one, let's say, because also, as I already mentioned a few moments ago, our other goal is to make present to not only to the EU legislator and to the EU policymaker, but also to civil society. And today's event is an example of this, that these territories of commons, these common lands actually exist. And they are, even if they are not maybe the biggest portion of the utilized agricultural areas of each country, still they constitute a relevant reality that cannot be completely ignored by European policymaker and European legislation. So the research questions that constitute the cornerstone of our research are three. The first one is, as I said beginning, how much land is owned, governed, or managed de jure or de facto as a common in Europe. So with this question, we would like to come up with a figure that estimates how many hectares let's say, pasture, grazing lands, croplands, waterways as well, are managed in a collective way as a commons. And of course, we in this first stage of our research, we try to adopt an all-encompassing definition of the commons. So we try to come up with figures that would include all the different and varied experiences all over the countries. For this reason, we would not include only de jure commons, like so commons that are legally recognized as such by countries or by the by the laws, but also de facto commons, so commons that are effectively enacted as such. So that could even be private land that are enacted as commons. And the second research question that we constituted the second axe of our research is how much food is produced in these territories of commons, because we would not only try to come up with a figure on the hectares of these commons, on the extension of these commons, but also we would like to figure out what is the relevance in terms of food production of these common lands. In many cases, as our research is now after a few months in progress, for example, we figured out that many of these commons in Europe are devoted to pasture lands. So the livestock units and sheep, cattle, and all other types of pastures are the dominant part of these commons, for example. And so this is the second research question that we would like to answer with our research, which is how much food is produced in these territories of commons. Then the last question is always with the aim of highlighting the relevance of these territories, is to try to come up with a figure also, or an estimate, of course, of how many people are involved in these territories. How many commoners are cultivating, harvesting, gathering, hunting, or fishing in these common lands? Of course, as we underlined in this slide, also here we would like to come up with a precise figure, because also it's very difficult to retrieve such exact information from every country. But of course, we would like to come up with some estimates on the relevance of these territories all over Europe. And just to present a little briefly this network that I mentioned at the beginning, that we are very proud of. In these last months, I think starting from November 2020, we built up a very large network of scholars and commoners from all over Europe that are currently researching on their countries and currently researching on these three research questions that I just mentioned. And we are collecting all these country notes from all these countries, which underline all the different experiences of these territories of commons in all these countries. As you can see from the map, all the red countries are the countries that already sent us a first draft of their country notes, and while the yellow one are those that they still have to deliver it, but they are currently working on them. So as you can see, we covered quite a lot of countries in Europe, and the final goal is to come up with a short article that José Luis will mention in a few seconds, and then we can proceed further for further research and better developing this extensive research and this extensive network that we built it so far. So now I think I can hand over the second part of the presentation to José Luis. José Luis, if you want, I can skip the slides when you say me so.
Okay,
is that okay for you? I don't know if you want to add something. Maybe I forgot something. If you want to add, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Antonio. And also for the sake of saving time and basically not detracting the audience from the really meat of this seminar, that it's basically the country notes and the progresses that the different researchers they have they have achieved so far. I think that I will be brief. But also, first thing, I would like to introduce myself. I'm José Luis Vivero, associated researcher to the University of Louvain in Belgium, in the Institute for Transdisciplinary Studies on Legal Science. That it was my alma mater, where I was doing my PhD on food commons and these normative, the different normative valuations on food, and how the idea of food as a commodity or food as a commons, they were instrumental in shaping policy decisions. And also, as Antonio has mentioned, and we are really thrilled to have achieved such an impressive network of scholars and activists throughout Europe. And as you can see, there is only one big missing country, that is Denmark. And it has an explanation, because we were told that, well, in Denmark, there is no commons, or at least no territories of commons. Of course, I mean, there will be new commons, but not the customary or traditional ones, because they were all of them privatized. It's something that we need to find out a bit more, but in principle, that's the explanation on the absence of Denmark. But for all the others, as you can see, it's really impressive. And that means that the products that we are going to achieve together, they will not be just significant for the European Commission or the European Union authorities. They will be significant for the pan-European area, dealing with issues that not only will have an impact on European Union policies, but also hopefully on European policies in different European territories and different member states. So I think that it's going to be a powerful message, the one that we are going to convey once we have results. And also, well, as you can see, I mean, and the key thing is that we are already progressing well. Of course, such a tremendous endeavor that in many cases dealing with non-existent information, or dealing with issues that have so far been hidden or below the radar, but now thanks to this network, I mean, they are surfacing, and then they are basically, we are uncovering relevant issues, because we have been shocked on the extension of common lands in some countries. And I will just mention a few days ago that we have a conversation with our Icelandic colleagues, saying that they show us a map of Iceland with close to 40% of Iceland territory. It's already a common land. So 40%, 40. So it's really, impressive. And that's the type of things that I'm pretty sure, the type of shocking data and relevant information that we will be able to produce together. So please, Antonio, the next one. Well, very quickly, you have seen that we have 35 member states and 65 contributors, because also we didn't want to have just one person per country, because also we understand that there are different approaches to the commons. It can be a more legal approach, or it can be a more economic approach, or now that I can see Pablo, it can also be a more anthropological approach to the commons institutions, and the commons as a livelihood, but at the same the commons from the food security point of view. Let's say the territories of commons are food producing areas. And that's why we want to really emphasize this link at the end, these policy implications on let's say, knocking to the door of the common agricultural policy, or let's say trying to influence the from farm to fork strategy, because we will provide data not just on the surface, but it's a geographical data, but also on the human number of people and economic importance of those territories of commons. So 35 and 67 people, I mean, 35 countries, 67 people, it's already a strong network. And that leads us to think about not just on the concrete two products that we would like to produce, please, Antonio, the next one, but also to think further and to think beyond these two products, because with such an impressive network, that it's already working in progress, and we are getting acquainted to each other, and let's say we are getting acquainted to the different specificities of territories of commons in Europe. I think that this network will be an impressive or tremendous platform to do something together in the future. Okay, and that's what I'm going to. That's going to be my last two sentences. But first, I will brief you on on the two expected products that we are going to get out of this work that we are doing together, this common work. The first one is a short article in a high impact journal, preferably Nature or Science, in order to have this political impact that Antonio has mentioned. And political impact in two senses: political impact within the academic community, and also political impact within the policy community, within the policymakers and the national governments and the regional authorities within the EU, and also beyond the EU, like the Council of Europe and the like. So we want to have this short article basically producing including three key items. One table, big table with all the 35 countries, with a lot of footnotes, disclaimers, and explaining, the different ages, we'll have data for different years, of course, but also there will be exceptions, there will be annotations, fine, whatever. But we'll have one table with the total number of hectares that are managed, owned, or governed as a commons in Europe. In some cases, they may be ranges, okay, because we don't know exactly the number of data. In some cases, the statistics are either absent or they're outdated, or in some cases, they don't provide they provide just statistics for some types of common lands and not the whole, the entirety. But at least we have something. We have a figure. We have three figures, three main figures: number of hectares, number of people, and amount of food produced, just to give an idea on what we are talking about. The second main product, the second main item within this short article will be a map. A nice map where we display not just the absolute figures, but also the share of common lands per country, the total one in the whole Europe. But also we may have this type of graphs where we present the circular graphs, where we present the relative percentages of common lands devoted to pasture land, to forest land, devoted to arable land, or devoted to waterways and coastland, etc. Just to give an idea on the similarities or commonalities and differences between European countries. And the third key point in this short article will be the final, let's say, 2 or 3 paragraphs on policy implications, saying in academic words, hey guys, look at this table. I mean, it's an impressive figure. And so far, common lands and territories of commons, they have been absent from your radars, okay? They have been absent from your documents, from your policy recommendations. They have been absent from the common agricultural policy. Collective lands and collective management is not even considered as a legal way to receive money from the European Union. Commons as a word, it didn't appear in the previous, because I think that Antonio has already been doing the same search, the same word searching analysis that I did with the previous documents. There was no single mention of commons or common lands in the common agricultural policy documents. So we need to improve that situation in political terms. And those, sketching a few lines on how we can do it, it will be the final content of this first short article. Then, second main product, it will be a long paper that in this case is going to be co-lead by Chris and Pablo and other authors. I think that Marianne also, all the authors that they are interested in putting their efforts in that, they will be co-leading a longer article. A longer article where we can really explain more in detail, commonalities, geographical commonalities. We can perhaps draft an initial typology of territories of commons in Europe with, big areas, something like Scandinavian countries, perhaps the Ireland and UK, Eastern territories, Mediterranean areas, and the mainland, something like this, and also presenting the differences, okay? Differences because the commons and the current situation of common lands in Europe, it's pretty much determined by geographical features, the highlands versus the lowlands, or marshlands or difficult territories versus arable lands. It's also pretty much determined by historical events, like the former USSR, the Russian, the Soviet Russian, and all the satellite countries that also they were initially staticized, but later on common lands were partially devolved to the people, and that's in Mediterranean countries. In some cases, there are some territories of commons with commons institutions that they have been thriving and surviving for more than 1,000 years. In other cases, due to the Protestant reform and industrialization, common lands, they have been highly encroached or privatized. So history matters, geography matters, but also now, more and more, activists and active people, active collectivities, they matter, not just to revive or revamp dormant commons that they were already non-functional, and they are trying to do new things with them, but also because new collectivities, alternative food networks, they are already organizing themselves in different ways. So we have customary commons and we have new commons. So well, those things also will be part of the longer paper. And also something else that it came to our mind due to the discussions that we were having with you in the last weeks, is that we could also think about co-editing an issue, and a special issue in a journal where most of the country notes, a bit adjusted or let's say improve a bit more, they could also be published all together as a special issue in a particular journal. Then those are the two main inputs that we will seek to get, hopefully within this year. And also we got recently a very nice opportunity with Insa Tensfield and Elia Carceler from the International Association of the Study of the Commons. That they offer us the possibility to organize an IASC official seminar on this issue, on food commons in Europe. So I think that in this case, this one is what we are doing now is an internal one that we are organizing within the network, but also we can have another one where additional papers could be presented within the ISC framework. It would be a kind of a different thing, because all that would enable us to connect this European network with other institutions that are working in other regions, like the United States, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And that also could be an interesting platform to launch the final idea. That if we have been relatively successful in convening all these people around this common interest of territories of commons in Europe, I think that perhaps we could also aspire a bit bigger and to dream bigger, to do something similar with the other regions, in order to come up with, in a few years, with a final figure of territories of commons in the world. And perhaps, and probably, most likely, we would be extremely surprised to learn how extensive territories of commons are, and the huge share of territories that are governed, owned, or managed as a commons in the other continents. With probably some of you have already read this famous author Liz Arden, that she already produced several interesting papers on territories of commons in Africa, and basically she was saying that close to half of Africa is still managed as a common land. I have been in Asia, and I know that there may be perhaps not 50%, but there will be definitely something like bigger than 25% of land in Asia that could also be managed as a commons. Let's see what we get out of Europe, but in Latin America also there could be big swaths of land. So you can imagine that at the end, after several years, we can come up with something out of my mind, but 1/3 of the total world at present is still owned, managed, or governed as a commons. That would be shocking. Okay, that would really turn the tide, and making common lands, commons, and collective institutions a key political thing, a relevant issue that can be no longer neglected. And I think that, well, we are trying to do this initially for Europe, and then let's see if we can connect with other initiatives like Landmark or ICA Consortium. We would need also to have additional support from some UN agencies and perhaps other type of institutions dealing with environment or climate change, etc. But we could already aspire to dream big in order to get this type of data at global level. And I think that with that, Antonio, that's
Yes.
over to you.
Yes.
Thank you
Thank you very much, Jose Luis, for your brilliant explanation. If I will be very, very short, just by saying, by introducing the, let's say, the agenda, the schedule of the meeting. If all the speakers, all the panelists agree, I would proceed in the following manner. We will start with 4 country notes presentation of 10 minutes each. For some technical issues, Pablo Dominguez for Montenegro and Lana Borčić for Croatia, they asked me if they can go first. I will proceed by doing the first 4 country notes, then we will have some Q&A, some discussion, and I remind to all the participants that if you want to ask a question, you have a Q&A curtain on the right of your screen. You can write your questions there, and I will do my best to read them all. Of course, depending also on how much time do we have after the presentation, but let's try to answer them all. And at 4:30, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jose Luis has a underogable meeting, has to leave for 20 minutes or something. So we can have a break when Jose Luis has to leave of 10 or 15 minutes, and then we reconvene shortly thereafter, and I have the last 5 country notes presentation and then the discussion. If that's right, if that's okay for you, I can stop sharing my screen. Okay. And Pablo, if you want, the floor is yours. Just a quick thing. Forgive me if I will be silly, but I will remind every speaker when you will have like 2 minutes left, if that's okay for you. I'm sorry about that, but we have very strict time, so I will be bothering you when you have 1 minute left, let's say, okay? When you have 5 minutes and when you have 1 minute left. Okay.
Okay, I would just need to know, how do I have to share screen?
Okay. You have the right now to share with the condividi button on the top right.
Okay.
You can see. Bottom, sorry.
Okay. There you go. See, it's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, because everything in Italian, and it's not easy for everybody.
Okay. I deactivate my audio.
I would like to move this away. I don't know where it goes. So.
Okay. Thank you.
So yes. Okay, I think you see it there. So I made a very basic presentation in the sense that it's a preliminary works concerning the Montenegro case. We jumped in this procedure collective impulse because we're just so seduced about the whole approach of it. So politically and scientifically in line with what Jose Luis has said. So all our chapeau, hats up for the effort and the organization of the whole thing you're proposing. At the same time that, so we hooked on this because we really believe in it. But when we were just like kind of starting to study the Montenegrin case, so we're kind of like very much at the beginning. So we kind of trying to catch up. And then that's why I put it into context, so you understand the presentation is going to be a simple one, and not many numbers yet for the moment, but okay, there we go. So on the left you see the pastures. So Montenegro is a very mountainous country. Its own name says Monte. Negro is because of the black forest it has all over the place. So it's very forested and has many pastures. So like it's a strong base for having a lot of commons. At the same time, it's very rural. So here in this picture, I just show quickly on the left, as I say, an area pastured, managed, and lived by local communities that are producing a whole bunch of food products of high quality, biological, and that have a huge potential, and that are sold at very high prices in the local markets. Some of these cheeses that you see in the image are on 26 euros the kilo, which is huge for Montenegro, where the mean, I mean, it's already big for Western Europe. So imagine for Montenegro, where the mean salary is around 300 euros per month. And on the right, you have an area with no commons, fully forested, where there's no more sheep and the cattle rearing, and where you have a beautiful landscape for a photograph or a tourist to do alpinism, but there's not much food production ongoing anymore. No animals, no communities living within it. And this is a little bit what we worries us, and why we also got into this. So the richness of this on the left side, and in fact desert, even if it doesn't seem or is represented by people as a desert on the right side, but it's in fact a populational desert and a commons desert. Here on the picture, on the card, I just show quickly. So Montenegro, as I was saying, has many pastures and forests. Here in red, you see the main pasture lands. So as you can see, it's like almost 1/3 or 1/4 of the country is covered by grasslands, highland grasslands that are pastured in summer and are traditionally were used by communally, and with time, of course, through history, the state slowly put many of the customary rules down, but we still have some in place. Has a heritage of pastoralism that is humongous. So the country at the end of the 19th century was producing about 1 million sheep per in the country that had less than 500,000 people. Today in Montenegro, there are a bit more than 500,000 people. So the population of animals doubled that of people. The pastoral tradition is humongous. And then there we think in Montenegro we have a big piece of the cake of the commons in Montenegro. But at the same time, as I say, it's a very forested area. So in the non-highlands where you have pastoralism, you have a very dense forest cover. And we believe that there, even if it's more state-owned than common pastoral commons, that are a bit more respected in their community management, at least, and use, have particular ownerships that could belong to communities, and we're starting to look at that. So meaning that it's a country with a high potential for common food production and identification. In fact, it's a little country. It is 1/3 of Catalonia, half of Wales, so it's a very small country. And I think it's worth putting it in context within its broader Balkanic neighboring countries, where you probably have the same situation. I'd say more. It's all very has a strong rural population still. It's very mountainous, which favors the appearance of commons, because you don't have these big arable lands where you can put big companies and corporations or state cooperatives or whatever to mechanize and privatize everything. But you really got plot by plot, little plots.
You have
and then
5 minutes, Pablo. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm halfway. So the thing is that you have very little arable land. As you can see, the map of Montenegro, that green part in the middle is practically the only area that you can do a bit more massive agriculture, which is a very small space. And this is the case for all the Balkans, as you can see. So advising a little bit also Jose Luis and Antonio, everything that all the work that can be done in the Balkans, which is at the same time, as you see on the map on the right, the most pluviometrically rain-fed region in the whole Mediterranean. It is at the level of Galicia, but it's in the Mediterranean. So it's highly productive because it has high temperatures and high rainfall. So high productivity, a lot of commons. That means probably we're talking about a region, one of the regions with one of the highest food productions through commons. So please take note. Then in terms of numbers, so I said Montenegro is very small, but it's basically so consider 37% farming land and 42% forest. So we're talking like what is it? 80% almost of the land. It's pastures and forest. There's very little arable land. Then this built areas. So the idea is that there's a big nature, and many of the pastures, as I said, and meadows are very often, nearly half of them governed commonly. There's a high degree of abandonment, but you have them governed commonly. Then forests, 67% are owned by state, but even though of those 7%, a part could be managed collectively. Arable land is very low, as I said, and it's generally private. So there we wouldn't find many common food production. And river flows and fishing that could be maybe have something, but we believe it should be minor. But there is river flows that are could be considered as governed commonly in some way or another. So this is what you have: a rural population still strong with high production of local products, exceptional, that are unknown to external markets, that have a huge potential for future development. And in terms of numbers, so we can make just a quick estimation. If you take the case of Sinjevija, where we worked, there in the middle, on the left, in red, that pulls in people from all around, has 250 families. That means about 1,500 people, 2,000 people, depending on the pastures directly. So if you look at the map on the right with the pastures, we can make a quick estimation that if you multiply that by the different areas, where some are more populated, some are less, but let's just take a mean, the mean of Sinjevija, and you could move on to maybe 2,500 families, so 15,000 to 20,000 people living from this type of productions, just as a pastoral level. Then you would have to look into the forest areas, but the gross of the production would be in the pastoral commons, I believe. So Sinjevija has the capacity to host up to 200,000 sheep. There's studies, very serious studies made about this by the Environmental Protection Agency of Montenegro. While today the numbers in Sinjevija, in this big territory, which is the biggest pastoral land, in fact, in high mountain pastoral land in Balkans, it has only 10,000. So from 200,000 sheep that it could host, it's only got 10,000. So meaning that the potential is huge, and it is totally, let's say, unknown and unpromoted, and it's just left there slowly to agonize and slowly disappear if nothing's done. So I think Europe should wake up on this issue also in Montenegro. I hope it's been useful to get just an overview of the Montenegrin case, and open to questions now or a bit later, even if in about half hour or so I'll have to go. Thank you very much in the name of me and my partner, Milos Djurovic, with who I'm working on this within the project IRIS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pablo, which I am sorry I didn't introduce you. Pablo is a researcher at French National Center for Scientific Research, and he worked on Montenegrinian case together with Milos Djurovic, who is attending the meeting as well. Thank you, Pablo. You've been really perfect on time. Great. Yes, if I think that it would be easier if we proceed with the next speaker, which should be Lana Borčić from University of Zagreb. We worked on the Croatian common lands together with Marin Cvitanovic from the Bournemouth University. Lana, the floor is yours. Please, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm opening my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it properly, thanks.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So again, my name is Lana. Now I will present our Croatian case. Where in our research, we adopted the loose definition of food commons you suggested to us. And from the very beginning, we realized there are huge discrepancies and inconsistencies within official data and between official and unofficial data. We gathered information and data from a variety of sources, from governmental and public institution reports and releases, Croatian National Bureau of Statistics, and we also conducted several semi-structured interviews with members of relevant governmental bodies and public institutions. We decided to categorize food commons in Croatia in two ways, in a broader sense and in the narrower sense. In a narrower sense, food commons in Croatia are pastures where multiple agricultural homesteads collectively use state-owned land, mostly for cattle grazing. But the only officially registered communal pastures on state-owned land, according to the State Audit Office, are recorded in continental Croatia with a total area surface of 10,600 hectares. This pasture land is located in the floodplains of the river Sava. These are rural pastures, which in the past until today were traditionally managed as commons. Today, they are officially managed by public institutions for the management of protected areas of nature, but decision-making process takes place through cooperative councils, where commoners can discuss and define rules of common use. These pastures are deemed very important in terms of preserving the biological diversity of the wetlands, in preserving cultural landscapes and the local traditional way of life. As you can see, 327 commoners use these pasture lands, and they have around 8,000 animals, predominantly cows. We consider this to be a core food commons in Croatia because only for this case we have accurate information how this land is used and managed. The next number we gathered is this number provided by Croatian National Bureau of Statistics. They report almost 300,000 hectares of communal pasture land in Croatia. This is an estimate based on the questionnaire survey of 1,300 agricultural homesteads, combined with some statistical modeling, which use some other auxiliary variables. Unfortunately, we couldn't find out anything else from Bureau of Statistics, so I don't know why, but all other information around this data are deemed confidential. And the only thing they told us is that most of these communal pastures are located in the karst areas in coastal Croatia. This probably refers to the mountains of the Dalmatian hinterland region and Velebit, where transhuman practices traditionally took place. So we contacted the Nature Park Velebit, and we hoped that they would be able to tell us more about it, that they maybe have keep some statistics on what is happening within the park boundaries regarding this matter. However, they could only confirm to us that communal pasture land on Velebit is still being used for cattle grazing, but they didn't have any further information about the number of people involved or the number of animals. We think that there are several reasons why this usage of communal pasture lands in Croatia isn't registered. One of the reasons is that we have a lot of unresolved ownership issues inherited from the communist regime of the former Yugoslavia and the inefficient national land inventory, which make it difficult to legally recognize these practices. Another reason is that the concept of communal governance is still very negatively associated with Yugoslav socialist system, and even worse, like cooperatives still bear very negative connotations. In the food commons, in a narrower sense, we also included data about on urban allotments. They exist in several Croatian cities, but the largest are in Zagreb, where they cover a total of 22.5 hectares of city-owned land, and over 2,000 people are taking part in its use.
Sorry, Lana, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll be finished. Food commons in a broader sense, we decided to include data on recreational fishing and hunting, on freshwater bodies and communal hunting. Waters in Croatia are common good. And some certain elements, such as joint care for the communal water bodies, fish stocks, wild animals, allowed us to include in our calculations the number of people and food produced, and in the case of waterways, the total areas. We decided to exclude the common hunting ground in the total area surface calculation because despite the care about the animals, it does not include the decision making and care of land where these animals are hunted. It's one reason, and another reason is that this would distort the results because hunting areas cover almost entire Croatian territory. And if we sum up all this data, we can conclude that food commons in a narrower sense include a bit more than 300,000 hectares of land in Croatia, and in a broader sense include up to 360,000 of land in Croatia, which is 6% of the total national territory. However, most of the people, activities, and food produced remained unofficial and therefore not registered. Thank you. I'm finished.
Thank you very much, Lana. Also to you, you've been very precise and punctual on time. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now we can give the floor. I don't know if we would like to go from North Europe to South or in alphabetical order, or we would like to present first. Please, if Sean or Chris or Siggy or who wants to go now, please let me know.
I can go if you like.
Okay, I think Sean is the next one from Ireland. Sean Shanagar from the University of Maynooth in Ireland will present his country notes. Sean, you would be able to share your screen from the bottom right.
Bottom right, yeah, I see the 3 dots there.
No, it's the condividi button. I'm sorry about the Italian, but we didn't know how to fix the language of WebEx.
I'm learning some Italian words today.
It's sorry.
Okay.
It's condividi and
then I can go to PowerPoint from there.
Okay, great.
Yes. Okay.
Great. You can see it.
Is that working?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Everything works. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for hosting the event, to Jose Luis and Antonio, and for the very good presentations so far. I've really enjoyed them. So I'll do a short presentation on the territories of commons in Ireland. There's plenty of areas, I think, where I can enjoy the feedback from people. So feel free to comment on it or to fill in the gaps. It's by no means complete, and there are things that I need to follow through on and develop. But at least it will give you a rough idea of what the situation is with the commons in Ireland. Okay, on to slide number 2 here. We have, I guess, what in many ways is the classic image of commonage, as it's called in Ireland. Commonage refers to upland grazing, usually with sheep, sometimes with cattle. Extensive areas, especially in the west of the country, on the western seaboard. So when people speak of commons in relation to Ireland, this is typically what the type of landscape and the type of agriculture that they are referring to. Quite marginal areas, but extensive at the same time. And my second image here is of, I guess, part of the history of commons and commonage in Ireland. This would be a clachan settlement using the rundale system of agriculture. Not too many photos of this system of communal living. Actually, it wasn't just pasture. It was a type of communal and collective living together, where houses, for example, could be exchanged between people on a 3-year basis, or another rotation system. So there was a high degree of collectivization in the past, and commons and commonage is in some ways a legacy of that. It is in some ways what is left of that system after other parts of the system were privatized with land reform and so on at the end of the 19th century and into the 20th century. Okay, so on to slide number, the first main slide, I guess, of text here. I've sketched out an initial typology of the types of commons that we can identify in Ireland. Some of these are food commons. Some are other types of commons that I've included, I guess, for context. Somewhere kind of in between. I'll explain that as I go through it. The first one is commonage, as we've referred to. That's the classic understanding of commons in agricultural policy in Ireland and at European level too. But we also have new and emerging commons, particularly in urban areas, alternative food networks, community gardens, community-supported agriculture, and similar systems. I'll say more about those a little bit later. The third commons, in some ways, is an in-between category. It could be a food commons, but at the moment, most of the territory is used for harvesting seaweed for fertilizer, for fertilizing small holdings. At the same time, there has been small usage of that for food purposes, and increasingly private interests are making use of seaweed commons for previous seaweed commons for food purposes. So there's a bit of a shift taking place there, I guess, that needs to be watched. The final two commons that I've included are not food commons, but as I say, I wanted to include them for just for contextual information, really. The Turbary commons, turf cutting, and group water schemes as well. So I'll speak a little bit about each one of these in the next few minutes. Okay, I'd mentioned a little bit of the historical context of the rundale system of agriculture and the clachan, which is the name given to the settlements within these agricultural areas. So a remnant of a system of tenure going back several hundred years, largely transformed at this stage, as I say, into something else. The second quote here as well, I think, is an indication of where things are at today. Farmers, commonage farmers typically have small private areas of private land alongside their access to commonage areas to supplement their incomes. Thomas van Rensburg has done plenty of work on this as well, and hopefully he'll have an input at some point into this research as well. Onto the extent of it, this is the extent at the moment, 423,000 hectares or so, about 9% of the UAA. It's the latest stat that I've been able to find in 2016. Unchanged from a decade or so ago when the last figure was found. So not a huge amount of change that I can identify yet. Mainly the western border regions, significant amounts of the western border regions, the upland regions, the boggy regions with high precipitation, low fertility, and so on. That's typically where you would find these types of holdings.
have 5 minutes. Sorry to interrupt,
5 minutes.
Sean. Okay.
Thank you, no problem. So we can see the number of cattle and sheep that we're talking about here. Significant chunks, particularly of the total sheep population, 22%, and also you know, like a large amount of the cattle population, about 8%, included in these figures. The latest number that I have for the number of farmers, for just almost 15,000. That's from a debate in the Parliament just a couple of years ago. We can see as well that there is a connection to the basic payment scheme, the agricultural payments coming from the EU, and that's often the lens, I guess, through which the extent of commonage and the number of commoners can be identified. Okay, on the alternative food networks, this is a small but symbolically important, I guess, emergent commons. It hasn't, in the last 10 or 15 years since it's begun, as yet kind of galvanized itself into something broader. But at the same time, there are quite a few community gardens, in and around 115 or so, probably quite a few more informal ones. The Community Gardens Ireland lists 115. A rough calculation of the extent of it might be maybe a hectare at the most for each of these gardens, probably less for some. On the community supported agriculture schemes, which can also be identified in different ways as commons, 8 of these at the last count. These are at field scale, that can be several hectares in size. And I think for me, a useful way to think about these types of commons are as a prefigurative praxis. At the moment, they're tiny, they're a drop in the ocean compared to the enormous extent of commonage, of pasture commonage. But at the same time, they do act as important social hubs, symbolic hubs, and you know, a certain amount of material production in terms of organic veg and so on, particularly in urban areas that have been disconnected from the land historically. So it'll be interesting to see how those develop, and whether those kind of projects will receive support, maybe through the kind of projects that we're engaged in here. Okay, a few quick words on the non-food commons, or the in-between ones, as I was saying in relation to the seaweed. If seaweed becomes more important as a food source, if it emerges as a kind of a real food source for people living along, particularly the western coast, this may be something that can be factored in. I'd be interested to see if other people, other researchers living in areas with extensive coastlines will be able to calculate the extent, the area of land that we're talking about, the intertidal zone, I guess we're talking about, the nearshore area. If we have a coastline as calculated somewhere between 1,500 and 6,500 kilometers, we could be talking about a significant portion of land in this kind of liminal area, I guess. But the folio rights historically have been associated with farmers living on the coast and using the seaweed, as I was saying earlier, to fertilize their small holdings. The Aran Islands is a classic example of this. Robert Flaherty's Man of Aran, a documentary movie from the 1930s, shows people building soil from the stone, effectively from the bare stone, using seaweed. It's a hugely important source of fertility for food growing and for other purposes.
1 minute, Sean.
Okay, thank you. And a very quick word on the Turby Commons. I guess part of the reason why this is relevant is because it's likely there's an overlap between commonage and Turby Commons, with farmers who have access to commonage also having access to Turby. So I think it'll be useful to kind of figure out how these systems interconnect and to get more detail on that. Again, I'd be interested to know if other researchers have experiences of this. And finally, the group water scheme, type of commons, I guess we could say, supplying water, at least if not food, significant portion of rural households. 330,000, Ireland's population is 4.5 million people. So, you know, a significant portion of people. Calculating the extent of that commons, very tricky, because it's a mixture of surface water and underwater sources. and whether we could include it in full commons is debatable too. Finally, here are my references. So I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I think that we can immediately go to the last panelist of our first session. And after that, we can start having some discussion and some Q&A and some, so if someone of you would like to go ahead, please.
Me, if it's not
you can go? Okay, great. We have Anna Kloczko-Gajewska. Forgive me if I, if I spelled your name wrongly.
It's right.
Okay, from Warsaw University of Life Science in Poland. She worked to the Polish country note together with the Ruta Spivak from Institute of Rural and Agricultural Development at the Polish Academy of Sciences, and Justyna Klobukowska from Nicolaus Copernicus University in Torun. I hope that I spelled your name correctly.
Okay.
The floor is yours, and yeah, you have 10 minutes. I will be just saying when you have 5 minutes and 1 minute, okay?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. We also face some interesting, problems and maybe challenges. So maybe we should share with you our findings. The first thing we found out that there is really the same rules in Polish law when it comes to private, public, and common property. If there are any differences in certain management or rights, they are written down explicitly in a particular legal act, like the Act on Forests, but there is generally they're the same. They used to be different for so-called social property, which was state and collective, until 1989, when there was socialist times in Poland, and since 1990 the laws changed, and since then the general rules are the same. If it's not stated otherwise in the law. So we could have either property of one person, legal or natural person, or two or more. So joint or common or joint property with specified shares, like one half or 1/4, or without specified shares, which is very important, because if you have not specified shares, you cannot sell it or give it away your share to anybody else. You can inherit it. If you want to make a change, like you inherit a house with your brothers, sisters, which is common house now, and if you want to state that you have 1/4 or 1/5, you have to go to a lawyer with all of the other owners, and then you can divide into shares. So this is very important when it comes to our common lands, which is historically rooted, because we have found some, the commons can be described or defined in many ways, so we try to distinguish different types of them. First are traditional land commons, created mostly in the 19th century, where the peasants were given freedom, and they were given the law to jointly use mostly either pastures or forests. And due to historical matters, I mean, the Poland was not existing. It was divided between the Russian Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Prussia. So depending on which part of Poland it was in which of the countries, there were different rules. This is why we have this traditional land commons mostly in eastern and southern Poland, when there was either Austro-Hungarian or Russian, and the Prussian one, mostly none of them, because they had different solutions. So this is joint property, most often without specified shares. So it's commonly owned and managed by the ancestors of those who got it in the 19th century. Some of them are now about 1/5 in the form of company and have specified shares when they went to a lawyer, but most of them not. And we have also this is the most typical common, like the most strict definition. We have also public forests, which is owned by the state or by municipalities, but anybody can access them for walking or collecting mushrooms or berries without limitations. Also, when you want to collect them for sale, it's also without limitations. provided that you preserve the nature, but it's obvious. And there is hunting allowed to the members of hunting circles with state control. They have to feed the animals in the winter, and they have to write down how many animals are there in the forest and how many of them they plan to shoot. Then we have a third type are urban allotment gardens, small plots of gardens, usually within city areas, like mostly bigger areas, organized in form of associations, and well, they are quite more than 50 or 60 years old. And the boards or representatives of each of the plots have control over how the plots are used. So the people who use them, they plant their flowers or vegetables. They are not the owners, they are the users, and they have to follow the rules of the particular area. And a new initiative are community urban gardens. And this is new. There are about 50 of them in Poland, new of them emerging or maybe stopping their activities. Mostly bottom-up initiatives or created by public benefit institutions like cultural centers, therapeutic centers. In cities, but there are very few of them and small areas, so maybe they will grow. And here we come to our doubts and discussions, like agriculture production cooperatives. The joint property with specified shares, one person, one vote, no matter the share, and the cooperative itself determines the quality, quantity, and packaging of the produce. So they influence what is produced in what way and how much. The members work for the common good, and they have to take care of the local society and of the development of the members. So this is maybe for profit.
5 minutes.
Okay, for profit, but on the other hand, it's also for social good. So we can discuss here if it's really production cooperative, if it's common or not. And even more doubtful are milk cooperatives, which they collect about 70% of milk production in Poland, and they just collect it. So, and we have also doubts about waters. We have to go deeper into the waters issue, and this is why we have not data on waters here yet. So we have collected some data concerning the surface, but and we have hard data are written in normal letters, and these italics are estimates. For example, when you look at traditional land commons, deep research on 7 of them out of 5,000 land commons in Poland revealed that only 20% of documents properly reflect the use of the land. So there was a student, a master student of forestry, who checked 7 commons, what is really growing on the land. And something that was called arable land or pasture is now a new forest, or the reverse. So really, we cannot trust the documents, even so it needs more work. We can see that if we include public forests, about 25% of Poland is commons. Of course, forest is managed by the state, but anybody can freely access them. If we exclude public forests, we can see that it's about 1.1% of the country. And when you look at food production, it's the last column, we can see that only in the urban allotment gardens in the cities and in the agricultural cooperatives, 4% of the population of Poland is engaged in this. And we found completely no data, no detailed data on production cooperatives. Of course, they have to have quite a big share. Like community urban gardens, the small share of land, and the cooperatives should have a big one. So if we get some data, we will be really rich in it. And okay, sorry, I have some old version. I don't know why. Could you please? I don't see my work. Could you please get rid of this presentation? Not sharing. Stop sharing. Okay, because I don't see what I wanted to show to you. I don't know why.
Don't worry.
One more second. Let me have one more try, because I did a lot of work to show something interesting, and this is just one transparency. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. And the last one, which should be okay here. So here we have we did a lot of efforts to calculate using hard data and some estimates, like production per one plot in 1995 times number of plot now, and minus 20% because people now would grow more flowers or less vegetables and so on. So this is really, really very the rule of thumb in some cases, and in some cases completely no data, which is is even more difficult to estimate without any data. So what is our conclusion? We could see that, we can see that we need to define the commons and describe their types, and other need for research on the actual state and activities, because we could find out that we don't know nothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think that now we can have some time for some Q&A, some discussion. I already have a question in the chat by Ruta addressing. She has a question to Montenegro, if I'm reading correctly. I don't know if Pablo can hear us. I will go on by reading the question.
Three different questions.
Yeah, few questions. Yes, oh, okay, but Ruta, actually, if you want to speak them out, it's I was forgetting that you all can have the word now, because we were having a seminar yesterday where the participant couldn't speak, but today you all can speak. So it's if you want, you can go ahead, please.
My general questions to all participants so far is who governs the areas. I don't know if this probably it's not easy to answer the common areas. Another question is, in case of EU countries, who receives subsidies for the common land, if any. And I was wondering, in case of Montenegro, if there are any data regarding the level of income received by the people utilizing common areas for work, like in case of pasture land in Montenegro. But it's probably also interesting to see anyway, if this people utilizing the common lands, what kind of income they receive, or what kind of money they receive from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruta. I just realized that Pablo and Milos from Montenegro are not present anymore at the conference, so I don't know if I think that they couldn't answer the question, of course. They told me that they couldn't stay all the meeting, so I don't know. I'm sorry about that. I don't know if there's okay. I'm sorry about that. I go ahead by reading a question of a participant, I'm sorry, by Irene Di Lauro. She has a question for Jose Luis and the organizer, so myself as well. I am based in Denmark and I have been working with urban food commons. I am sad to know that Denmark is not on the list for this work. Who did you refer to about this matter in Denmark? I would be interested in changing that. I know there are many areas commonly managed in cities at least. So this is a very interesting point, Jose Luis. What do you think?
Yeah, no, indeed. Actually, I would interpret it as an offer to participate in the network, and exactly. Definitely, I mean, it's an open network, and we would welcome anyone from Denmark, and especially not just on the new commons, or let's say contemporary commons that may have been created recently in urban areas, or like this we have seen alternative food networks, etc., but also someone from Denmark that may have an interest in territories of commons and food producing commons, more than welcome to the network. So we can already color the blue shape of Denmark and to put it either in red or in yellow. So please get in contact with us, and we will welcome your comment, your participation. Over to you.
Yes, I agree with Jose Luis.
Now, I'm sorry, as I mentioned before, I need now to have a break because I need to move to another meeting, but then I will return in less than 30 minutes, okay?
I will check. Okay, see you in a bit. I will go ahead with the other questions and comments, and we will have a break shortly. I'm checking because I'm sorry, because I'm checking as well, not only on the chat on WebEx, but also on the YouTube chat. So I am very busy. I don't see other questions right now at the moment. I don't know if any of you want to speak out some questions.
Pablo.
Yes.
Yes, I think that a part of Ruta's question was maybe addressed to me, so I can maybe discuss that on the community supported agriculture.
Yes, please go ahead.
Projects. Yeah, I mean, I guess it does come back to the thorny question of definitions, and I guess our discussions are ongoing in terms of what the commons are, how we can define them. But the community supported agriculture project that I would be most familiar with here in Dublin involves a farmer with 6 acres of land, let's say 3 hectares of land. He owns the land, but the project is or has been until recently has been buyer led. Okay, the project has been led by the people who purchase the food from the farmer. So I guess the group does have a constitution, so it's a formally constituted organization. So I guess therefore under the heading of governance, it could be defined as a commons, but you know clearly there are other definitions of commons that we could think about as well. On the other, I think you also had a question, Ruta, on the level of income of farmers. I could just say generally that the farmers who are involved in commons in Ireland, in the West Coast, would be low-income farmers. They would be at the much lower end of the spectrum compared to, for example, much larger, completely private holdings in the east of the country and in the southeast of the country. So it's very much farmers living quite precarious existences. I mean, a rural precariat probably is not putting it too strongly.
If we have time, in case of CSAs, because we didn't include CSA in our table, so that's why I'm curious. Maybe we should change it. I know that some in France or in Czech Republic, there is a land owned by a community, yes. But in case in Poland, I don't know how it's in Ireland. This is the private land, but utilized in the way of as a CSA, yes. So this is why I was curious if on what basis you consider CSA, because in Poland it's private land.
Yeah, that's right. Now, there may be one exception to that I'm aware of. One of the eco villages in Tipperary, and they do own the land that their CSA is based on, but I think they're an exception. That generally it's privately held land.
Sean, hi, it's can you hear? It's Chris Short from the UK here.
Oh yeah, hi Chris.
Yeah, hi. Antonio, I hope it's okay. There seems to be some silence. So I did put a question in the chat, but it wasn't so straightforward. But anyway, I was intrigued by your thought about the foreshore collection of seaweed. I guess the situation in the UK is that the state owns or the Crown owns the land between the tides, if you like. But the access to that is for your own personal use. So you're not meant to use it for financial gain beyond, like the example of putting seaweed on your land would be fine, but you couldn't then have a business collecting seaweed and making fertilizer to sell. So it's a sort of foraging area, I guess. And certainly, well, Gwyn and I, we talked about it, but we haven't calculated it as common. Although it's open to many, I guess. Okay, is that similar for Ireland? I guess, and I think my question really is that similar for Croatia or Montenegro too?
Yeah, I think it's a similar situation in Ireland where the land would be owned by the state. These folio rights, Chris, I think would be individualized. So I suppose what was crossing my mind as I suggested that really was, the gathering of mushrooms or the gathering of berries in woodland might be analogous in some ways. But also, I think the case of nearshore, foreshore gathering is interesting because a few years ago the Irish state sold the rights to gather seaweed privately to a Canadian consortium. So in some ways you can kind of see an illustration of privatization of the commons through these kind of situations as well. But to my knowledge, there would be no formal structures governing gathering of seaweed. It would be more, as I say, along the lines of foraging for sure. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. I think we might have lost our chair, our moderator, did we?
Antonio?
We can have a coup and find another moderator and just get rid of Antonio. I'm just kidding.
Who was that suggested the coup?
hear me? Hello? Can you?
Now we can hear you.
Oh,
Yes.
we didn't.
you're back.
We didn't know what exactly happened. I mean, I'm sorry about that. I was speaking to you and saying we could have a break, but I think no one understood that. So I was
Yeah.
okay. I was saying that we could profit of the Jose Luis that left for 15 minutes. We can have a break of 10 minutes now and reconvene at in 10 from in 10 minutes. Okay, it's okay for you?
Yes,
Great. Okay. Sorry about the technical issue. We solved it.
no problem.
See you in a bit.
Nem pripremi, moraš da si donio za ručak.
Marin, we hear you.
Okay, now we just wait for the others to join, to come back, and then we can restart. Maybe one of you, Mateja or Sigurdur, wants to go first in this new session. I don't know. Since you're
Yes,
already...
I can
You
do.
can go? Okay, great.
Yeah.
I will share I will make you the presentator, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, now if you want to, you can already upload the slides when people will arrive.
Yes, thank you. Just a moment, I'll do it immediately.
Yeah, don't worry. No rush.
Okay, so okay, so do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, it works.
Just let me know when do you think it's good time to start?
Okay. Okay. I think that, I mean, perhaps everybody's here. I think, no, maybe let's just wait 1 minute and we start, okay? I think that everyone is coming back, so. And I will give you the timing during your presentation. Okay, maybe I start by introducing you, okay, Manteja, if you want.
Thank you.
The next country note that will be presented is by the Slovenian team composed by Mateja Schmid-Rbar and Mimi Urbank from the Research Center of the Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts. And presenting now is Mateja, and she will present the country notes on common lands and common territories in Slovenia. Please, Mateja, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Antonio. So good afternoon to everyone. As Antonio mentioned, I'm coming from Research Center of the Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts from Anton Melik Geographical Institute. And in the next minutes, I will present you Slovenian territorial commons. In Slovenia, commons are generally understood as special forum of jointly shared private property managed by the community according to a specific set of rules. This is a definition that we defined in our common paper a few years ago. And the term nowadays mainly refers to common lands, which are in Slovenia mostly forests and pastures, and to a lesser extent also agricultural lands, and in very rare cases we also found springs. And these common lands are managed by so-called agrarian communities that perform collective actions. And as you can see, these commons are actually natural resources that provide certain benefits, which are in the form of multiple goods and also ecosystem services, not relevant only for the members, but also to general public. And many times they are also important for public. And in addition, the economic benefits that are gained from the management of common lands, members of certain communities can support local development. We presented one case in a Livec community in a paper that was just published this spring, and you can read it, what was going on there. But it's important income to support local development. Just to give you some brief overview of the history of Slovenian commons, like in many other places, most commons were formed on less productive lands after the emancipation of Serbs in 1848. But similarly to Croatian commons, Also, Slovenian commons suffered or faced very turbulent period after the Second World War in the communist regime. The property of agrarian communities was expropriated and nationalized. And only after the Slovenian independence in 1991, when the Slovenia adopted legislation dealing with denationalization, this legislation allows for the re-establishment of these agrarian communities. However, it is estimated that about 1,000 to 1,500 agrarian communities and their common lands were abolished through the nationalization process of socialist regime. And the size of these lands remains unknown. In 2013, Premrl reported that in Slovenia, there were 638 agrarian communities registered in the administrative unit register. But we have to be aware that not all of these agrarian communities were active. And he also reported that for some agrarian communities, actually for 48, property restitution procedures were still ongoing. And it is very similar situation also these days. We still have many legal, unresolved legal issues. Then the Slovenia adopted a new act, Agriculture Communities Act in 2015, aiming to simplify these procedures, but at the same time also forces agrarian communities to re-register by October 2022, which is next year. And this is another burden for many agrarian communities. So let me just give you some figures. Like many other countries, we also lack of figures, we lack of data. And the only reliable data on territorial commons that we managed to find were data from 2006, which were basis for the paper by Petak and Urbans, Common Lands in Slovenia. And according to that data from 2006, there were 28,454 hectares of forests, almost 17,100 hectares of pastures, a bit more than 16,100 of agricultural lands, and a bit more than 9,600 hectares of other types of land uses. So altogether, 71,093 hectares of lands belong to common lands, which is 3.5% of the whole territory of Slovenia. And if we take a look at the map of Slovenia, we can
you
see
have 5 minutes, Matija, sorry to interrupt.
Okay, thank you. We can see that these commons, that most of the commons actually can be found on the western side, actually more precisely in the northwestern parts where are alpine mountains, and also on the southwestern parts with the Mediterranean area with Kars Plateau and Istra. We can find common lands larger than 200,000 or sometimes even more larger than 500,000 of hectares in that areas. While in the northeastern part, there are just a few. And especially in the middle of Slovenia, there are almost nothing. So this was about the traditional commons. And now let me just put a short note about the recent trends that is going on in Slovenia in past, let's say, decade. We have witnessed of creation of modern form of commons, such as community gardens. I know at least for 3 community gardens well working at the moment in Slovenia. We have energetic communities, a landscape park, nature reserve, food cooperatives. Just last week on the field work, we We learned about community vineyards managed in organic way by group of people, and then they produced excellent organic wine, as you can see on the picture, in the bottom picture. But so far we don't have any data at national level about these forms of commons, and this should be also studied and analyzed. And let me conclude with highlighting 4 main challenges that we have with commons, and that steps that we need to take further. So the biggest burden is the lack of data at national level. We don't know how many agrarian communities actually registered according to the legislation from 1991 and 1994. And we don't know how many agrarian communities already managed to register according to the law from 2015. And this is very crucial because some commons might disappear because they will not be able to re-register or to register early enough. So we need a comprehensive study of current situation. Also to know the structure of their members, and also to know the types and hectares of their common lands. Then, as we noticed, these commons, they are important also for the general public, not just for the members. So if now they are threatened to be lost again due to this act from 2015. And if this is going to happen, also the general public will lose some goods and benefits and ecosystem services. So also the goods and ecosystem services of current territorial commons must be assessed and preserved. Then the third, members in agrarian communities at the moment are getting old, and we know that there are mostly men. So it's urgent to pass the knowledge also and to include youngers. And it would be also good to involve women, which were quite overlooked so far. And finally, as we noticed about this emerging of new territorial commons, and we don't know what exactly they contribute, but we know that they contribute maybe some food, or maybe they preserve landscape not to get overgrown and so on. So we should encourage also establishing new territorial commons, both in rural and urban areas. And this is my presentation, so thanks a lot for listening to me.
Thank you, being perfectly on time, Mateja. Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation about Slovenia. Like before, we can go on with the next presentation, and after all the others, we can start by some Q&A, some discussion. On the panel, we have Chris. So you want to go ahead for UK? Great. We have Chris. Just a second. Okay, we have Chris Short and Gwyn Jones. Chris Short works at the University of Gloucestershire. I hope that I spoke that correctly. And Gwyn Jones from the European Forum on Nature Conservation and Pastoralism. They worked on the country notes on the territories of commons of England, Scotland, and Wales. And please, Chris, the floor is yours.
Can you see the screen okay? And hear me?
Yes,
Good.
yes, we can see it perfectly. Thanks.
So this was a quick rundown of common pastures in the UK. And I'll do the presenting, and Gwyn has promised to answer all of your questions. Thank you for the introduction, and very much enjoying this afternoon. So the UK is split for the purposes of this into 3 different legal jurisdictions, which makes it a little bit complicated. Common land in England and Wales is counted as registered common land with a few exceptions. And this can be seen in the map. The purple areas are the areas of registered common land, and then you might, if you look closely, you can see some red lines, and these are the other areas of common land which have their own legal status. In Scotland, the vast majority are registered crofters' common grazings, and you can see those in the very top of Scotland, in the north of the top of the picture, in red. Northern Ireland, we won't talk about a great deal, but it's very similar to Ireland, as Sean has outlined. Large impact of reforms there, loss of commons, but they have similar commonage as in the rest of the Republic of Ireland. Commons in the UK are an expression of multiple specific property rights which people have over land which is owned by another person. So these are legal rights in perpetuity. There's a fancy Latin name which basically means it is property in every sense of the form, but it isn't actually physically seen. So it's the right to graze, it's the right to take wood, it's the right to take fish for your own personal use and livelihood. So these are the historical technical definitions that apply for England, Wales and Scotland, but these have essentially been superseded by being on, or in some cases not being on, an official register. So there are many areas you can see across the UK which would have the word common in their name. So they were once upon a time a common, but they're not on a register now, so they're not classed as common. Looking in a bit more detail, covering England and Wales first. So there's a single legal tradition now, or a single legal tradition in England and Wales. However, Wales does have a devolved parliament, and so they could, if they so choose, begin to take a different direction. In England, there's 555,000 hectares, of which 370,000 hectares which is registered common land, and that is made up of over 1,000 units, and 4% of that are England land area. Some of those units are hundreds of hectares, thousands of hectares maybe, others are half a hectare. So there's huge variety of size, but you could see the concentration in the map before towards the west and the north. In Wales, it's 180,000 hectares, most of which is registered, 2,000 registered units, and a larger proportion, 9% of the land area. If we look at numbers of farmers using that, the easiest way to look at this is those who are registered for cap payments. So that's just under 4,000 in England, just over 3,000 in Wales. But as I'll show you in a second, the number who actually use the common is almost certainly to be lower, but the number of rights holders is much larger. Majority of whom, again, as I'll show you in a minute, are not active. There's no uniform governance system. Many commons have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Some are mentioned in the Domesday Book, which was written in 1086, at the behest of William the Conqueror. But many grazing associations have been formed in the last 30 years in order to be able to access agri-environment payments through through Europe. And this has brought, so that's quite a number in Wales and England, that's brought a lot of stability. Now, I mentioned the issue between rights holders, those who claim basic payment schemes, and those who actively manage the common. This is some data that which Gwyn was involved with a colleague Sean Brackenbury on Gower in South Wales. The blue columns there are the numbers of people who actually have rights to graze a particular common. So sometimes you can see that's 120. This means that they own the land to which the rights is attached. If you look very closely, you can see a red bar at the bottom of that. Those are ones who are potentially graziers. In other words, they're agriculturally active. And if you look very closely, then you'll see a little green bar at the very bottom, and those are active graziers who are managing or grazing their livestock on the common, grazing being the majority.
You have 5 minutes, Chris.
Right.
Sorry.
Fine. Very good. So moving on to Scotland, there's just under 600,000 hectares of crofters common grazing. That's 8% of Scotland's land area. 12 to 15% of rights holders. Just over 4,000 use the common grazings to claim CAP, and that's 20% of the farmers in Scotland. However, just as before, as I showed you in the graph, the active users are likely to be lower, at closer to 1,000. They're regulated, in the case of Scotland, by the Crofting Commission, but many grazers do not have committees that are in office. In other words, they don't have officials to manage or look after those. So whilst there is some regulation, doesn't necessarily mean activity on the ground. And we thought we'd finish here by just showing you the diversity of commons in the UK. So the top left, that's a village green, a small area of open space within a community. There's a very large area of open space in the city of Newcastle, which is common and is still grazed. So some of the upland areas, the one, so you see my cursor, this one here with the cows and the view, that's very close to where I live in Gloucestershire. The New Forest, in a sense, with the ponies in the south, grazing marsh, mountain, coastal areas, beaches, and sand dunes. So a huge variation. Every type of land area, in a sense, is covered by common. There's some figures here which only apply to England. We're rapidly trying to collect them for Wales and Scotland, but we know them to be similar. And this alludes to the other benefits. So it's a small proportion of UK. This is your takeaway message. But commons are not just important for food. They're very important for public goods such as biodiversity, protected landscapes, archaeology, access areas, culture, and ecosystems, that cultural heritage. And if we want to meet climate change in terms of storing carbon in peat or having clean, fresh water to drink, then commons are hugely important, far disproportionately compared to other areas of land. And that is where I wish to leave it. Do get in touch through various means there if you want to. I wish you and very happy to answer your discussions, particularly as Gwyn has offered to do that task for me.
Thank you very much. Very brilliant presentation. And yeah, we wanted very much that England, even if it's not a part of the European Union anymore, joined this network because, of course, we knew that the long tradition of commons in this country. So I'm very glad that we found Chris and Gwyn working on this. They're very active and very nice people, and very good researchers as well. Now we can go on to the next presentation. And who wants to present? Who want to present? You perhaps, let's say, I don't know. Just a second. Sigurdur, do you want to go on with Iceland?
Yes, I can.
Okay, just a second. I pass you the power of the presentations. Sorry. Okay, just a second.
To change the screen a little bit here.
No, you cannot do it because I have to pass. Puoi aiutare un attimo? Just a second, technical issue. I have to do like this. No? Cambia ruolo, imposta come? Era già. Okay, now you can go on by sharing your screen. I think it works now. Yes, great. Sorry about the technical issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
And thank
please.
you,
The
Antonio
floor is yours.
and Jose to host this event. Yes, my name is Sigurður Torfi Sigurðsson. You can call me Siggi. It's easier. And I work for the Icelandic Agricultural Advisory Center. Even though we most of our work is connected to consulting farmers, and we do a lot of analytical work and advisory and educational work, especially for the for government. Use of common land has a long tradition in Iceland, and also cooperation between farmers. The farm boundaries and the line between farms and had to be declared from the land was settled, and they are described. The boundaries of the first farms are kind of closely described in the Landnáma, the Book of Settlements, written in the 11th century. And it also is decreed in the old law books, and there's also put in some details how to use common land and how it should be disturbed between farmers and etc. Yeah, and the right and the knowledge of using farming land was kind of something that went on from generation to generation. But for example, following some periods like after Black Death, which killed large proportion of Icelanders, their total, the near total eradication of people in some areas resulted in loss of traditional ecological knowledge. So, but þjóðlenda or common land are defined now in special laws, and it was accepted in the Parliament in 1998, and it includes the legal definition and delimitation between farmlands. And to follow this and to activate this new law, they put up a new committee which was called Óbyggðanefnd or Wildlife or Wilderness Committee. We can translate it into that. And they were their purpose was to make clear of the ownership of the governor's land and the private land. In the common land in Iceland, every citizen or the public, the general public, have a free access, in exception of very few high protected nature conservation areas. And most of its land, of the land, is in the highland, in the center of the highland, and has quite limited vegetation and some of it is believed to have been degraded through centuries because of unsustainable sheep grazing. The lower elevation of this territory.
You have 5 minutes, Siggy, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Was believed to have or was believed to be covered with birds woodland, and much of this forest has disappeared because of sheep grazing and other impact of human. Bird hunting is allowed in the common land, and fishing is managed often by right owners of the grazing land. All land in Iceland is by the laws categorized in private and common land, and major of the state land is classified as common land. The other land that the state owns is some farms that are leased to farmers, but almost 41% of Iceland is today classified as common land, and it covers almost 40,000 square kilometers. The accurate number today is 3,940, which is close to 4 million hectares. But they still haven't, the wilderness community has not cleared some of the land, and it is in the court now. This map of Iceland here shows the territory of common. And put on the laser. And we can see the light green here. This is a territory that has a historical background of common grazing land, but some of it is actually not allowed for grazing anymore because of degradation and other things. The darker green is land that has a historical background of being connected to some specific farms or some institution like the church. The church used to own a lot of this land. But the other one, the yellow one, is glaciers and other land. Iceland is, or most part of Iceland is kind of dedicated to or devoted as a pasture land. But the grazing density is vary quite a lot between some regions. It is some areas have been overgrazed and need to be and do not or cannot be grazed as much as other one. But data of grazing density are not have not been collected yet, but they are the Soil Conservation Service is collecting those data, and they are also developing sustainable indicators.
You have 1 minute, Siggy.
Thank you. Just to show you, this is a map that shows the condition of the ecosystem in Iceland and the capacity for the land for grazing. And you can see this black line here shows kind of the outlines of the common land, and most of the land inside the common land is in poor condition or is not suitable for grazing, but some of it is quite good for grazing, and they are usually the land that are used for grazing. And the last slides are here, and this is kind of the data that shows the relevance of the use of common land in Iceland. We have today 1,432 sheep farmers in Iceland, and we can assume that 70% of them have an access to the common land, so that gives us up to 1,000 farmers. And if you add the family, so then there is like 4,000, which is 1% of the population in Iceland. If you use the same numbers for meat production, because we use the pasture or the common land or the pastures on the common land only for sheep grazing, we can assume that about 6,500 tons is produced by using common lands in some part. And the common land has also some value, just like historical value and for cultural, and it adds a lot of value to the practice of tourism. And I want to end with a quote from Stephen Craver, and he said that Europe's top 1% of the wildest area that we may call wilderness is around 43%. It's to be found in Iceland. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Sigurdur. It's really interesting to see how much land in Iceland, like 40% of Iceland is governed as in a collective manner. It's really, I mean, for the first time I saw that data, I was a bit shocked about that, because it's a very huge part of it. And so it's really interesting. And perhaps at the end of the presentation, I would like to make some conclusive remarks underlining all these relevant data that you bring to our attention. And now we have last two presenters that are Albania and Cyprus. I don't know if Oriane Crute want to go, or Johan is from Cyprus. Or Oriane, you want to go? We cannot hear you. Just a second. Okay, dobbiamo passare il. Just we give you the power to present.
Okay.
Okay, now you can share your screen. And just presenting yourself in the present you in the meantime. Okay, from Albania we have Oriane Crute from Marseille University and AIDA Association, and François Lerin. But they're not the only one. Also, other researchers worked on these country notes. They are not present today, and hopefully they will be present at our next meetings in the future. And I want just to introduce this work by saying that the country notes of Albania is a very relevant data, and I'm really curious to listen what Oriane has to say about it. Please, Oriane, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Oriane Crutex, and I'm here with François Lerin, and we will present you our country note about food commons in Albania. Each photography show Albanian commons. So, okay. So the first part is about historical background. In 1912, Albania became independent and start locally some agrarian reforms. Before the Second World War, the situation about land management was as follows. Some landless peasants, few large landowners as Bey, an heritage of the Ottoman Empire, and a majority of very, very small farms. The Albanian communist regime from 1946 to 1991 implement a radical agrarian collectivization process. All lands become state property. A second important point to note is during the communist period, agricultural lands doubled to the detriment of pasture and forest. this increasing of agricultural land was by irrigation, massive land amendment, or terraces. After the collapse of the communist regime, two things arrived. On one hand, the agricultural lands were privatized on an egalitarian basis according to the law on land from 1991, from July 1999. Then during the 19th and the 2000 and the beginning of the 2000s years, a massive rural exodus results in land abandonment in remote rural areas. On the other hand, a complex and incomplete process to devolution, forest and pasture from state to municipalities start on the middle of the 19th and continue nowadays with the last territorial reform in 2014. So as consequence, nowadays there is a continuity of agricultural, forest and pasture lands in commonly use. So thinking about common leads us to consider the land tenure and land use, but also the nature of the resources and the description of the ecosystem. About the description of the ecosystem, Albania is a Mediterranean mountain country with many resources from semi-natural vegetation as garrigue or maki, but also from multifunctional and mixed Mediterranean forest and from mountain pasture. So now the second part about some numbers. And on the picture, just to note, it's a donkey carrying medicinal and aromatic plants from, of course, a common area. So we used the category of Corinne land cover to class each land use according to the likelihood to be considered as common. So in order to create this map and also in order to count the high likelihood of common land. On this map, the high likelihood of common lands, so in green and a little bit in yellow, coincide with mountain area. Agricultural plain are in red, so it's not common land. And you can see just on this picture here is the special, it's a consequence of this landscape. A really typical landscape in Albania is a consequence of the law of land, which privatizes all the agricultural land, but just agricultural land. And so you can see all these really straight parcels because it's privatized on egalitarian basis. So it's just agricultural land, but all the other lands, pasture and forest, are from the state and from the municipalities. Now.
And you have 5 minutes.
Okay. So about food production on common lands. Two things, pastoralist products and also medicinal and aromatic plants. Commons enable food autonomy at national level in animal products. So with meat from cattle, sheep and goats, but also about dairy products, very often transformed to cheese or fresh cheese or butter or cream. And also something very important to notice is in Albania, the importance of medicinal and aromatic plants. Many people harvest this medicinal and aromatic plants. A large part of the 7,000 to 10,000 tons of medicinal and aromatic plants is exported. And it's really important in the commercial balance of Albania. And we mention here two other products, honey, around 4,000 tons per year, essentially for local consumption, and chestnut, and the half is for the export. So another typical landscape of Albania, honey production and communist-style building, now abandoned building. So after we try to think about the importance of cultural and social of these commons. So many traditional dishes and beverages are produced by using resources in these commons lands, as pastoral cheese and cream, as kashkaval, salsekosi, gize, but also regional dishes, tav elbasani, and famous beverage like chai mali, salep, or raki. Chai mali is mountain tea, and raki is an alcohol very spread in all the Balkans, but also in Albania. And it's important to notice that the current for this product is growing. Albanian city population are more and more asking for these products. When they go in the bar and restaurant, but also to have treatment with traditional phytotherapy based on these medicinal and aromatic plants. And also, the municipality of Tirana is thinking to build a dedicated marketplace for this product, a special marketplace. A second thing, this common land, so very spread because it's around 40% of the territories, as in Iceland. So it was interesting to have also the example of Iceland. So these common lands are also very important for maybe all the rural household, or the rural population of Albania. We mentioned that worker and owner of mixed farm, it's around 286,900 units, but it's also very important for the income of the poorest household, poorest rural household. And the income of the medicinal and aromatic plants harvesting, it's very huge in the part of this income of this rural household.
You have 1 minute, Horian.
Okay, just I arrive to the conclusion. So with this specific land reform history and the nature of the Albanian landscapes, we think Albania is a relevant example to show the importance of commons in Mediterranean areas. And just to finish, to thanks, we are two today, François and me, but it's a work done by a French Albanian team. So Claire Bernard, which a researcher from CIRAD, Alice Garnier, which conduct many fieldworks in Albania, Roland Marcoux, PhD student, Albanian PhD student from University of Montpellier, and Besmira Medoli, which worked at the municipality of Tirana. I finished. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jan, to also to present the other colleagues. I didn't have the names now in the flyer, so I couldn't read them. Thank you very much. I think that we can leave the floor to our last speaker for today, which is Ioannis Vojatsakis. I hope to spell it correctly.
It's fine. It's fine.
Thank you. From Open University of Cyprus, who worked on the Cyprus country note together with Maria Zomeni from the same university, and Menelaos Stavrinidis from the Cyprus University of Technology. Please, Ioannis, the floor is yours.
Can you see my screen? Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Or not yet?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So we're going down to the south and eastern part of the European Union. First of all, I would like to thank Antonio Solis for the invitation. It gave us, or me rather, an opportunity to delve into something that we haven't had thought that much about, I must admit. Although this presentation was prepared by myself and my colleague Manelos, hopefully there are more people apart from Maria involved in this venture in the next few months. We have a lot of interesting things to, or rather queries to resolve, as you will see in a while. So in the same way that other colleagues presented, and I suppose we all unanimous to that, that land tenure and land ownership in a country is inextricably linked with the country's history and the country's geography. Cyprus, in that respect, is not an exception. However, it's a difficult case study. It's an island state with a complex land tenure system. Now, we always tend to think of an island as a single entity. And in most of the maps you will see on Cyprus, you will see it obviously as a single entity. The reality is, as probably most of you know, is far from ideal. We have a divided island, a result of an armed conflict in 1974. You can see this map, the green line is actually the UN buffer zone, separating what in the south is called the area which is effectively controlled by the Republic of Cyprus, which is the government that represents the island in all international organizations and the EU. The northern part, which is actually effectively under Turkish administration after 1974, which is about 38% of the island. And you can see also two color blobs there, that kind of purplish and orange on the southwest and southeast of the island, which is the two British sovereign base areas, so effectively British soil. So you have an island which was until 1878 under the Ottoman Empire and then passed to the British Empire. And what you have on the land is an Ottoman land tenure system superimposed to, a land tenure system which afterwards was superseded by British laws until 1960, in which the island got its independence from the British Empire, and a system that came into place and stayed into place until 1974. So after 74, so the unified stats for the whole island spans the period to 74. After 1974, there's no kind of official collaboration between the two parts and no official agreement on almost anything, let alone statistics. Actually, the acquis communautaire does not apply in the northern part of the island. So the official statistics I'm going to show you today, which are beyond 1974, are the official statistics which reflect the area under control, effective control of the government of the Republic of Cyprus, are those that go into the statistics of the European Union as we know it. And as a result, providing a unifying account of ownership and tenure for the whole island is actually an arduous task. For every slide, this is a kind of disclaimer, for every slide you're going to see from now on, you will see at the bottom side of the slide also the size of the island. We have refrained from actually giving you any percentage statistics. You will see some statistics, but since we are very sort of wary of the numbers that we have for the reasons that you will see in a while. We haven't worked out percentages, and this is why for every slide I'm just giving you the area of the island in kilometer squares as well as in hectares. Now, no surprise here, we've heard it from other colleagues as well. There's no consistent recording scheme of the common lands on the islands. Actually, what you find on the official statistics is far from the numbers you find is, as you will see in a while, very different to the numbers that the official cadastral service of the Republic of Cyprus provides. Statistics, in other words, does not agree with the mapping. As in many European countries, forests under state are often used with or without profit, with or without permission for various uses. And this is the case for Cyprus as well. Right now we have, at least in the European Union, we have declared something like 114,000 hectares of utilized agricultural area out of 140,000 hectares of agricultural land. And while statistics and numbers remain, if you want, problematic, the spatial extent is even more troublesome.
You have 5 minutes, sorry, Jan.
Sure. So lands are not properly characterized or even understood. Even within departments of the same ministry, there's a different understanding of what common lands are and how they are or should be used. Some of these lands which make the official statistics includes Meral or Hali, which is Turkish terms referring to land converted over the years to forest or grazing lands allocated to farmers through official permissions. So semantic complexity, along with the changes in use over the years, means that they are not properly mapped to date, since land tenure tends to be confounded by their actual use. For example, in many cases, you have this Hali land or Halitika in Greek, which has been given by the state for the development of community-related projects, but remain under state land. And this is a first attempt. This is very recent that we found. And you see the figure on the right-hand side talks about 2,361 hectares under the Farm Structure Survey reporting of 2010 of common lands. However, and this is 2020, if you see the term agricultural areas in Halitika land, you will see 40,000 hectares being declared essentially as Halitika, which is common land. So you have cadastral service reporting one thing and the Farm Structure Service reporting on something very different. And of course, this Halitika land is distributed under different categories of land use: forests, settlements, lakes, even mining quarries, simply because this land was given for extraction activities in the past. It remains a state land, is retained as common land, but is under lease or in some cases even given for free to some communities. So even when you get into forests or pastures, which are probably the potential most common lands, you will see state forests which have communal use, free use by the communities around it, municipal forests and grazing areas, particularly permanent pasture land, which is under, for those of you familiar with the European European Union Habitats Directive, it's under the Habitat Type 6220, the pseudo steppe with grasses and annuals. And this is very common in the west part of the island. So these are two maps: state forest land on the left-hand side, permanent pastures on the right-hand side. You see there is some overlap, but for common land is actually found. Don't ask me where exactly right now. I will not be able to respond to you, but is actually found in these two maps, in these two categories. Okay, pastures, they have high concentration in the west part of the island. So the relationship of humans to common land is not really that different from other European countries. You have agricultural activities like vineyards and olive groves and carob and grazing, which is part of these common lands. You have the provision of tangible community benefits, such as wild food like mushrooms, herbs, or fuel wood, beehives, of course. And just to give you a first attempt of the peoples and communities engaged, I would say that doing a very...
you have 1 minute, Yannis, sorry.
That's enough. Crude enough estimate, if you want to guesstimate, with a very simple overlay of GIS. There are probably 254 out of 612 communities. And by community, I'm actually referring to the smallest admin unit in Cyprus, smallest geographically admin unit in Cyprus. There are 612 all over the island. So probably 254 are bordering these common lands. 160 are more dependent on those lands. 110 on the mountains areas of Troodos are bordering forest lands, approximately 25,000 people, and 10 communities in the west part of the island, which is very dense, very sparsely populated, about 2,000 people, probably depend on grazed lands. These are some questions that when Antonio was reviewing a case study posed to us regarding which food is produced, which is the percentage of total food produced, whether it's possible to estimate how many people on average. We haven't got an answer, a precise answer to these questions, but we're actually working on it. Hopefully, we'll have these answers shortly. We're in the process of gathering data as well and try to clarify the terms and understand how people perceive, and by people actually, not people, sorry, how authorities perceive common lands. And this is my final slide. Thank you for your attention. I mean, what I found over the last 3 months that we're trying to gather data once we started the discussion with Jose Luis and Antonio is I'm probably more confused than I was before. But as I said, this is work in progress, so bear with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yannis. Thank you to all of you for the presentation. Now, I have a question that is, I'm reading a question from Professoressa Labrese on the Q&A, and it's actually a question that I think it's really relevant, and it's directed to all of us, basically, all of us as researchers for these territories of commons in Europe, which is the following. What do you think is the relationship between common lands, so these territories of commons, and climate change? Have you come across any data on this? And I think it's a very relevant question that I mean, if some of you want to have some ideas on this, Chris already mentioned something for the UK case, but I'm curious to know also what do you think about this. Also, if Jose Luis wants or other wants to take the floor.
And Antonio, I was looking for the raise hand tool, you know.
Okay.
But I don't know if you find it in WebEx. But very quick reaction, because it was one of the issues that later on, as soon as we, let's say, once we finish with the questions from the audience, I thought also I would like to have a few minutes to provide a kind of summary of some relevant points. One of them was on the relevance, yet unexplored relevance, but I'm pretty sure that it will be also an amazing research to be done on territories of commons as carbon sinks. Okay, I mean, especially because most of them are, as we have seen, are pasture lands that they have already been proven as tremendous carbon sinks that contribute to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere, and therefore mitigating the impacts of global warming, as well as forests that are also, you know, our natural machines to keep the atmosphere breathable. So perhaps we haven't yet done the analysis, and it could be a spin-off project out of this research. Over.
Yes.
If I can take the floor.
Yes, please go ahead.
It's about this question of climate change versus commons. It seems to me that we can enlarge a little bit the focus, because maybe there is about this type of ecological landscapes or geographical configuration, or whatever it's called, new injunctions coming from the climate crisis. That is to say that there is the idea that there is obligation for these territories to capture carbon, for example, but also to be managed in a way that private property, for example, is not pure private property abuses. You have to, for example, clean your saltus or forest situation. So what is very complex in the definition of commons is that property rights and obligation, uses are create a very complex situation in at the local level, and this is changing in a way to kind of balances. Thank you.
May I have also a comment?
Please go ahead.
Okay, when it comes to those traditional land commons in this sensu stricte, in Poland we have very different types of management. I found few case studies, and in one of them it is managed jointly by the group of owners. In the other one, they get every year different plot part of the common land, and then they rotate these plots, which is there's a risk that they would not take enough care of the land because next year somebody else uses it. And the third type we found, they just let it to a private person who just uses it as a private land and pays a rent, and the money is used commonly by the owners. So these three types were already identified when we talk about the agricultural land. And there's some traditional commons being forests that are managed by the owners. One of them hiring professionals and using it for tourist purposes. So at least four different types in only traditional land commons. So it's difficult to say about their impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. If you want, I can read some of the questions that I see on the chat. I don't know if all of them are questions or just consideration. So I try to see if I can formulate in my questions. Of course, Mateja highlights that regarding carbon sequestration, most of the commons, and that's actually right, most of the commons in the European countries that we researched on are forests. So, and as we know, forests are important carbon sequestrators. And Ioannis highlights that the connection, the other connection is essential as corridors between Natura 2000 sites and providing climate-proof spaces. I don't know if you want to deepen a little bit this reflection, Ioannis. Please, you go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, assuming that the majority of the area is actually low intensity and low intensity in terms of management, it means that if we retain them as such, it's a bit like the argument with high natural value farmlands. And though I have to admit that there is an overlap between high natural value farmlands and what we call them the common lands. So essentially, high natural value farmlands, and if you want, we expand it to common lands, as long as they actually manage with low relatively intensity. I mean, for example, in Cyprus, we have carbon olive groves, which are actually under the traditional agro-civil pastoral kind of system. Now, these areas are great because essentially they function as ecological corridors in the landscape, and in the future should species shift the ranges, and should we find ourselves in an awkward situation, although most of the studies are actually saying that species will sort of migrate outside of Natura 2000 sites, okay, then we have at hand something to assist this migration to more suitable climate space, and common lands can common lands can play that role, can act as corridors for shifting species ranges, can act as corridors for providing hopefully climate proof spaces, areas where the climate will be better or at least facilitate species movement.
Thank you, Yannis. I'm going on reading some of the. Sorry, Oriane, you want to react?
Just
Yes, please.
just go. It was just to say, yeah, I think we work on common lands and the importance for cultural and social aspect, but it would be also important maybe to have some paragraph about the importance of this common land in environmental aspect, climate change, but also biodiversity. So the two things that we spoke just now.
Thank you, Oriane. Do any of you want to react? Want to say something? I'm reading, and I agree with Jose Luis. It's a thing that I wanted to say actually at the end as a conclusive remarks. That I think that one thing that we can. Oh, sorry, Manteia. Yeah, I'll give you the word just in a second. Sorry. No, one thing that we should be aware of is the enormous diversity of these commons around Europe, and this, of course, is a strength. But I see it also as a weakness, for example, because it's difficult, as also Marin underlined and in other meetings we had, and most of you underlined, it's difficult to find a comprehensive framework to categorize all these varied experiences around Europe under a same container. So I think it's really interesting, and I'm really share the thought of Jose Luis. Please, Mattea.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it would be very good to assess the value of the commons, not just in terms of food commons, but also in other values, because we just noticed that there are also so many other aspects that are important. And at least in Slovenia, I know that with losing these commons, let's say that maybe some private company or some, I don't know, other entities would own them, this would significantly be changed, you know, and we will lose such ecosystem services or goods that we are having them at the moment and taking them as granted. At least in Slovenia, general public takes a lot of these values as granted. So this is all I wanted to say. That I think it's very fruitful discussion, and what we have can be really developed in a very nice project.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And actually, I see many comments. I'm unfortunately I cannot read them all because it would be just me speaking. So I invite those of you that wrote them to speak out and say them out loud, so we can have a shorter discussion on this, and finally we will have some conclusive remarks. Please, Jose Luis.
Thank you, Antonio. I've already found the tool to raise hands on the right side. Just very briefly, okay? Two comments. The one that you just mentioned before on the complexity, you know, the commons are complex, legal regulations, political approaches, differences between de jure, de facto, customary traditions, but that complexity is also a curse. It's a problem for the commons. It's definitely a richness, and it gives the idea that they are really thriving, but at the same time, it's a curse vis-a-vis the legal bureaucrats, that they want to have everything standardized, and you know, the commons, they need to be defined equally, and they need to be exactly the same throughout Europe in order to receive, for instance, subsidies from the common agricultural policy. So, I mean, this idea of the diversity as a richness and a curse at the same time is an interesting point. And the second one that I would like to make is common lands as custodians of different relevant issues that are extremely important for Europeans. And I will name just a few. Of course, a carbon sink, and we will need to, as I mentioned, as part of this network, and let's say in 1 or 2 years, we may have several spin-off projects dealing with those issues. But okay, carbon sink. biodiversity. Common lands are reservoirs of biodiversity, pollinators, birds, and endangered frogs and the like. Also, areas where we can find European heritage, monasteries, architecture, but also traditions, practices, etc. Landscapes, European landscapes that are now protected in many countries as part of the common European heritage. Well, many common lands are part of those important European landscapes. And finally, in many cases, as we have seen, highland pasture lands and forests and water basements, etc., they are very important as water catchment areas that they later on provide water and water layers to feed the rivers that they at the end are so important for everybody. So all those issues, are extremely relevant services, contribution of common lands to the European society in general. Over.
Yes, exactly. And I would add that from our presentation today, from all these experiences, I remind to all those who are listening to this event that are just a few of all the country notes that we received, because we just presented 9 countries today, but there's still other 11, no, actually 12 country notes that we already have, but unfortunately today couldn't speak. So what I would like to stress is that these common lands actually exist, and this is it's just a very simple statement, but actually also a very powerful one. Powerful because they exist, but still there's no mention at all in every EU legislation, piece of legislation from the 60s onwards. I went through all the common agricultural policy documents from the 60s onwards. There's no single mention of them. And of course, they do not constitute the biggest amount of agricultural lands in Europe, but still they exist. So it should be nice if the EU legislator would take them into account. I don't know if someone else of you wants to intervene for some conclusive remarks, some additional questions. I warmly invite you to do so. Okay, please, Yannis, go ahead.
I'm just, of course, I reply, but I think the analogy, if you want, or the overlap of common lands with high nature value farmlands and forests is a very important one. In what sense? In the sense that, as Jose Luis put it before, yes, we tend to actually, or rather Brussels, tends to want uniform definitions or a uniform approach by the countries, but at the same time leave in an open window to countries to actually sort of map and measure areas the way they want. And this was a common issue with high nature value farmlands as well. I mean, if you see the European-wide study conducted by the JRC, the Joint Research Council, and the individual country studies, you will see huge variation between these two and within. And I just kind of feel, because I've been there in the past, that we will face a similar issue with common lands. I suppose I think what we need here is a common denominator. There's no way you can come up with the same definition of common land, because common lands or land tenure in a country is linked to history, is linked to geography. Okay, and every country has its own particularities. I mean, I think we all agree on that. But I think I just feel that we need to have a common denominator, i.e., a common working definition of common land. I told you, I mean, we had this discussion, or we had a couple of times, we've met as a group a couple of times the last few months, and what I see the more I get into it, I'm talking about Cyprus, I'm not talking about the rest of the European countries. Okay, the more I get into it, the more confused I get. Okay, because there's a variety of fragmented info and a variety of fragmented, if you want, perceptions about common land, and that will not help us. I mean, will not take us anywhere. I respect diversity. I'm happy by it, but I need to have something to start with. What I usually say, but this is perhaps because I'm coming from an ecological and a geographical background, in order to measure something, if you want to measure it, let alone protect it or management, you have to know what it is, and you have to know where it is to start with. And right now, I don't feel I can do that for Cyprus, and I'm just talking about my own case study. Thank you.
Thank you, Anis. I perfectly understand your point. And Jose Luis, I think, wants to react to you, to also Francois. Who wants to?
Well,
I saw Francois raising a hand. I don't know if it was a mistake or I don't know.
I just want to add something about the environmental situation and the importance of the commons. I think that, and this is not about the definition of the commons, the straight definition of the commons, and what we can say to political powers or politics. It is about the concept of commons. In a way, today, I think that the perimeter of the commons is, again, enlarging itself. During a long time, it was private property did grasp the common lands and the common properties. And now, I think with the environmental crisis, there is a possibility of increasing the perimeter, because you say to forest landowners, small or big, to churches that possess as private properties big lands, etc. You say, okay, you have the property, but you cannot do anything, everything with this land. You have to be in line with the function of these forest or this pasture or these saltus lands, with the question of the climate change, biodiversity, etc. And in a lot of cases, in Belgium, for example, or in France, you have more and more injunction or legal obligation for the private owners to do something and in this way, their property had a part of the property is a common issue, is a common property, but of all the citizens. All right, and this is important for the conceptual discussion about the commons, and I think that there is this pressure to a new enlargement, so to say, of the commons through the environmental crisis. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Antonio, may
yes,
I?
Please go ahead.
I think that for the sake of time, and as we have already exceeded a bit.
Yes, that's one thing. Yeah,
I think that we should already give a kind of final.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
A final resume with a few points. And if you allow me, and I would like to provide a few general comments, general remarks, and particularly before I would like to address Johannes' question on the common definition.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay. And then we can already close. Well, the first thing is that just responding to Johannes, because it's a technical one, and then I will give a kind of my final closing remarks. Johannes, I mean, you are right, okay? And I fully understand your point. But also you may understand that due to the complexities of common lands in Europe, and we have already seen just a few of them, legally speaking, are diverse, historically speaking, even much more. In some cases, we have differences between proprietary schemes and also bundles of rights. and well, everything is extremely complex. So for the time being, what we decided in the first meeting, if you may remember, is that for the time being, we would be working with a loose definition of territories of commons or common lands. And later on, as long as we progress, I would say as soon as we finish the country notes and we put them together, and hopefully if we can meet physically one day in the near future, in a couple of days, having enough time for a very complex task, I think that we can already think about fulfilling that idea, okay? So now that we already know what's going on in our countries, having us together, let's try to come up with a working definition of territories of commons, at least for the European space. And I agree with you, it's highly needed, because later on, let's say in the future, once we publish the documents, we will start negotiating with country authorities and regional authorities at European level. Those definitions, they will become pivotal and important, okay? So I agree with you, but it's a work in progress, okay? We will do it, but for the time being, we decided not to get entangled in terminology or definitions, because we didn't know exactly what we were dealing with. That's regarding your point. Now, some general remarks. The first one is that thank you, because I really enjoy this evening like you cannot imagine. And I'm really amazed, I'm delighted to see the diversity of territories of commons in Europe. And I hope that you may share my joy, because it's really, I mean, I've been working with commons, and particularly commons in, well, I know a few of them in Spain, but also I was aware of commons in England and in a few places in Italy. But now I'm really amazed of the diversity and the extension of territories of commons in Europe, okay? So it's really impressive. And that's why it's so surprising, as Antonio has mentioned earlier, that that huge extension and diversity of commons is absolutely absent from European policies, okay? No mention at all, at least regarding food producing commons. I know that in some cases regarding environmental policies, there may be some references, but even not that much, okay? The commons is not in the EU radar. So that's one point. So a few issues. The first one, I will be mixing some technical remarks with some general ones. I've seen, based on the different presentations, although I apologize because I've already skipped two of them because I had another issue, another clashing meeting, that I've seen that we can already start thinking about a typology of territories of commons with commons in the traditional way. I mean, pasture lands, forest lands, and arable lands. Then we may have urban commons, alternative food networks, vegetable gardens, as we have seen extremely relevant in some Eastern European countries. I mean, the case of Poland is one that epitomizes that importance. Near shore commons, so coastland commons. Sean has just mentioned the importance of seaweed, that by the way has been privatized to a Canadian company, but it's something amazing. But also I remember, as I mentioned yesterday, that I was born in Galicia, and you know, seafood, clams, prawns, crabs, all those fish that are in that they are basically food commons available in the shorelands. I mean, they deserve some attention. Then non-food producing commons like turbary or something like medicinal plants, that as we have seen in Albania. Waterways, lakes and rivers. As we have seen in some countries, waterways, they belong to the state, but in some other countries, they are managed as common land. And I will add two more. Cooperative-owned territories, that in some cases, as I remember, I think it's in Romania or in Croatia, but I think that I remember to have read one of the country notes where cooperative-owned land, that it can be considered a form of common land. It's also widespread and interesting. And finally, a tricky thing, hunting and fishing permits and territories where you can have this type of hunting and fishing license that in some cases are managed directly by the state, in other cases are managed by brotherhoods or by clusters, by members, by clubs, etc. So those are a kind of preliminary typology, so far 7 types of territories of commons. Then on general themes, then also we have two types of layers to understand the commons. One is using the legal approach, who owns the land. And in that sense, we have private land, public land, and in some countries, we have even collective land that is legally recognized in the legal frameworks. But also we have not just the proprietary schemes, we have the users' rights. And as we have seen, there may be users' rights over public land, there may be users' rights over public land, private land, and there may be users' rights over collective land. That it's the normal stuff. Then another point, as we have seen in cases like in Montenegro and Ireland, the importance of common pasture lands, in pasture areas, in pasture lands, for meat production. Okay, and I've 22% of the total sheep flocks in Ireland, they pasture in common lands. I mean, 22%, 1/4. Okay, so it's a considerable amount of meat that is produced thanks to the common lands. Another point, also, we have seen two distinguished elements of common lands within the European context. They are deeply rooted in European history. And then we have seen that the current situation drinks pretty much on what has happened before and how the previous states and empires that were dominating our current sovereign states, how they were managing and approaching to the commons. It has a strong influence in the current situation regarding enclosure, but also regarding protection. And also, we cannot, and that's a very political message, we cannot understand European rural areas, we cannot understand European landscapes without understanding the commons, okay? Without taking the commons or putting the commons into the picture. Because landscapes and European rural areas, they own a lot to common lands. Not just to common lands, but also to the commoners that are managing common lands under their own institutional rules. Also, we have seen that so far in many countries, commons have been resisting the privatizing and enclosing waves because they are found in fringe areas. In some cases, in areas that are very far from the capitals, where therefore the governmental officers, in some cases, they are not willing to arrive there to collect taxes, or they were in highlands with low arable land, so there was not interest to privatize those places, or in very far remote areas in Iceland or in northern Finland, so I think that well, it's an interesting case to note that the commons in Europe, at least at European level, they have survived because they were far distant and non-accessible. Another point, let me add two more. Then food products, food producing commons are still relevant, and we have seen several important cases. Meat, I mentioned, for sheep and cattle. Berries, medicinal plant, mushrooms, that in cases like in Scandinavian countries, and also in Eastern European countries, and I can tell you also in specific provinces in Spain, mushroom production is a profitable business, okay? And it's a relevant industry. So it's not a petty thing that people are just doing in their leisure time. So, and I've heard that there are people going from southern countries, particularly from Italy, that are going to the north, to Scandinavian countries, just to benefit from the everyman's right to collect mushrooms to be sold later on in the south. But in any case, mushrooms, honey, chestnuts, and also I will add another thing, putting these big aerogenerators in common lands that is now becoming a common practice in my home region in Galicia. And people, they want to get money out of that, so they already authorize aerogenerator, Aeolian energy, to be established there. People, although we haven't seen many references to how many people are directly involved or benefiting from common lands, I just mentioned that for Poland, it's more than 2 million people. More than 2 million people just for Poland. It's worth considering. Okay, so it means that the commons are relevant, not just because the surface, the coverage is big, but also because the number of people that are affected or benefiting from them is also big. And finally, let's say one of the key figures that we would like to come up with and to produce together is what's the percentage of European land that is owned, managed, or governed as a commons. I will just summarize a few figures. 25% in Poland, 40% in Albania, 40% in Iceland, 6% in Croatia, 15% in Cyprus, and then also 4% of England, plus around 5% of utilized or arable land in Italy. I mean, not negligible. Okay, so once we put them together, I don't know exactly, and I cannot dare to figure out a final figure, but if it's higher than 10%, we already nailed it. Over to you, Antonio. And again, thank you very much, because I was thrilled with this seminar. Over.
Thank you, Jose Luis. Yes, I will just conclude by thanking you all very much for being present today, even if virtually. Of course, we couldn't do it physically, but I hope that we'll have the occasion in the next months, in the near future, to have a meeting together and meet physically, because I'm really proud, and we're really proud of having building up this huge network of researchers committed to this one goal. And yes, basically, I don't have anything to add, and just to thank you very much for all your presentation. Have been really interesting, and I will remind you that the event of today will be available on YouTube from the channel of Sant'Anna University, to rewatch it if you want to reshare it with people and colleagues and so on. I have nothing to say anymore. I just thank you very much, and forgive us for ending a little bit late. I had to manage all the technical issues at the beginning, together with Simone, that was here, but so forgive me if we were a bit late, and forgive me also, especially Gwyn and Sean, they had some technical issues acceding to the meeting. Apologies for that. Hope everything went fine after that. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. Thank you again. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much, guys. Well done.